And welcome back, everyone, to the Bitcoin Business Bureau. I'm your host, as always, Litecoin Leader. Today, I wanted to share some news that's going on in the rest of the world, as I like to do. I'll tread lightly, of course. We talked a lot about it on our AMA last night over at Crypto Confidential. If you're not a member, you can find out more details below, and I'll be making more videos about that, about to really share what's going on. I'll post one up here as a link as far as what Crypto Confidential is all about. It's about 5 minutes long. You should really check it out and see what we have to offer. Plus, if you become an affiliate, which we talked about last night, an affiliate just means you have a link that you can share to people if they want to join. And if you get 2 people to join with your link, it pays for your full year of subscription. So it's really worth checking out. You get the newsletter, you get the 2 AMAs a month, you have a private Telegram, you have access to us. Really, with getting access to myself, Divvy Daddy Patrick, Omar from Viva Capital, Michelle from Purple Owl, Purple Owl Consulting, I think is her. She's a crypto attorney. That's always what I think of with her. She's one of the top, if not the best, crypto attorney, and works on structuring and stuff, and key part of the team. So it's a lot to cover, and there's a lot going on there. But then we start by talking about some of the news, but I'm going to do it in a different way, and I'm going to lead up to a discussion about risk. Okay, we're going to talk about perceived risk and actual risk. So let me share my screen and see where I'm at here. So, first off, the first thing here we've got is that, this has been talked about for the last few days. Let me jump windows here, but China depositors are banned from withdrawing their savings at one of the banks in China. And this is happening in more than one bank. And now they're putting tanks on the streets to protect, not to just like quell potential riots or people going crazy in the streets, but to protect the banks. They're protecting their system because the system is crumbling and people want to get their money out. They haven't been able to get their money out in months. For some of them, they can't pay their debts, they can't pay their mortgages because the money's trapped in the banks. So now you have the economy imploding, and people don't know what to do because they can't get access to their money. So I I will make mention of a video that I did about bank bail-ins, and I'll share that. Let me try and remember. This is more for my editing purposes, so I can come back to it. But what I will do is I will come back to this screen and I'll post a video link up here about bank bail-ins. It's an important video to watch. This goes back to the GFC, the global financial crisis of 2008, give or take a year. How the banks were too big to fail. The economy almost imploded in the United States if they hadn't intervened and done something. They already lost a few banks as part of the process. But as part of that outcome, 2 years later, they created a law called the Dodd-Frank bill. I think that was named for two senators or representatives, whatever, that created the bill. But part of that was that the big banks had to have a rule, or they had to have a bankruptcy plan. And part of the bankruptcy plan was that all of your deposits would be reallocated and given to their creditors as part of their bankruptcy plan, which means that your deposits are not safe in these banks. And if you're thinking, well, what about FDIC insurance? It's way underfunded. At most, it's 2% funded, which means that you get $2 for every $100 you have in there if you're lucky. So this is why we say, not just with crypto, but with other banks, you need to protect your own wealth and protect your own you got to protect your own wealth. You have to be your own bank for many reasons, and you can't trust these bigger banks. Now, smaller banks and credit unions are not. The Dodd-Frank rule doesn't apply. I will post again. Let's check out the video, and there'll be a link in the description about what banks are like the top 50 or so banks. I think it's $250 billion of assets under management. Those are the banks you want to not keep a whole lot of money in. Not financial advice, but if you are worried about this potential bail-in issue, act accordingly. So let me go back to sharing my screen, and we're going to go over some of the other things as I was walking through this. And the original post that I found was Wall Street Silver last night, and they were showing the video, and I'll let that play out for a minute. It's only like 18 seconds long in a whole loop, but tanks are being put in the streets, and they're protecting the banks. And there were 4 banks, not just one, but 4 banks that they're trying to protect. The people you can't get your money out. So, so you got that going on. And then as I looked further at what Wall Street Silver was talking about, you've got all these, we have upheavals in Ecuador. You have protests are growing in Ecuador over a spike in cost of fuel and food and other basic necessities. by the global inflation. I've been talking about this, and so is Economic Ninja. That once that the average citizen of a country, their monthly income, more than 40% of their money goes towards food and basic necessities. You get these kinds of reactions. You get government, you get uproar, riots, upheaval, people in the streets protesting because the government's not doing what they're supposed to be doing for the people. Because again, this is where we don't trust them, and it's about risk versus perceived risk, and we're gonna get that to the minute. And here's another one that I want to talk about. Another platform bringing it to cryptocurrency, ZipMex. I don't know exactly where they're based, but another one, they suspended the ability to withdraw from the marketplace because they were probably promising high interest on certain deposits, and in order to fulfill that, they would put things in higher risk investments on their end. And if those things are starting to not manifest or not produce as expected, they will say you can't withdraw your Bitcoin because they need those assets to try and make up for what they are missing. So there's a lot of issues. And again, not, you got to be your own bank. And here's one more I want to share. More protests. And here's Panama. It's getting bigger in Panama due to rising fuel and food prices. Same kind of thing. So you've got all these upheavals. And I wanted to share one last thing from my Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, you should be. But here's a good post that I share that everything in life comes with a risk: career, business, marriage, kids, friendship, investing, faith, on and on. The key is to manage your risk and put the odds in your favor. The only guarantee is that there will be risk involved. So this is where I say time to dust off the actual risk versus perceived risk conversation, which is where I'm going to go to now as I drop out of sharing my screen. So perceived risk versus actual risk. And this kind of goes back to the whole stablecoin thing. Perceived risk, like originally when Bitcoin was coming out there in the last 4 or 5 years, and I've the time out since I've started getting into it, since I think it was 2016 when I got in, bought my first crypto. It was Litecoin, hence this logo and my name. But cryptocurrency was perceived as extremely risky, right? And it was the stock market, the bonds, the treasuries, the dollar, all that stuff was much more less. It was less risky. It was not as risky. But as proven over time, we've now seen that it is not an actual risk. It is a perceived risk. It's perceived as risky because you look at the price of Bitcoin, you see all these crazy fluctuations up and down over the years, because not because every price is a ratio of two things. So you have Bitcoin and you have the dollar. So if the dollar gets wonky, the Bitcoin, the ratio between, if one of them gets if one of them changes value a lot or loses, like the buying power varies, then you're going to see fluctuations in the ratio of the two, which is the price. So Bitcoin, I remember it below $1,000, and now it's well into, like, it's, we know it's gone almost to 70. Now it's down in the 20s, but the risk has actually gone down for Bitcoin because once you understand it, you understand that the geopolitical risk, the risk of all these nations and governments and what they're doing with banks and bail-ins, all these different things they're doing, the financial markets, to keep that financial market going and keep their control going, is way riskier than being in a system that is not governed by any government of a country. So, or even a European Union, types like that. So perceived risk. So the perceived risk in Bitcoin was much higher than the actual risk. And if you had taken the time to learn about it, hindsight's 2020, but if you had put money in Bitcoin in 5 or 6 years ago, you have been much more well off than you are today in being in the dollar or any other fiat currency. But that's not what the talking heads were telling you. They were saying that, oh, well, they even give it the name of stable coin because the stable coin is all tied to the US dollar. But that inherently implies that the dollar is stable. And we're seeing that it's not. We know the dollar loses purchasing power year after year after year, time and time again, going back all the way to when it was created in 1913, the Federal Reserve back then. And which since then it's lost over 95% of its purchasing power, and it continues to do so as we see inflation. Inflation is just another form of theft by the government that's taking away your buying power. So if inflation, they say it's 9%, it's probably more, it's more like double that, which means that anything you buy today for $10 is going to cost 12 or 13 a year from now, minimum. So those are the kind of things that you need to be wary about. And the risk versus perceived risk, the risk to being in a a financial instrument that's outside of a government control, you see what can happen. As I shared all those images, I mean, just go back to just look at these videos again. You see Panama, and you got exchanges having issue. Panama, Ecuador, China, tanks on the streets. And even if you, and another thing you don't want to do is leave your coins on an exchange. Again, that's like you try to minimize your risk and understand wealth is really wealth is created by seeing the difference between actual risk and perceived risk, or actual, or the price and the value. The value of Bitcoin is way higher than the price in the US dollars. That's been proven time and time again, and will continue as we go into the next upswing in the next 2 or 3 years or so. When it breaks 100,000 and keeps on going, probably 200, 300,000. And people say that'll never happen, but no one would have pictured that Bitcoin would be $60,000 when it started 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago. But when it first priced, like we all know the pizza story about the first guy who bought something tangible and he bought pizza with Bitcoin. It was the first time that a value was put on it and actually buy a physical product. And now, like it hit $1 in 2011, and now it's been rolling ever since, and just keeps going up. And so, actual risk. So if you can identify the difference in the two risks and say that the actual risk is lower than the perceived risk, that's a value in that. Not financial advice, but anytime you find that, that's usually a good idea to get involved in that project or get involved in that asset, or however you want to do. But if the actual risk is lower than the perceived risk, there's a lot of upside there. So take advantage of it, learn more about such things. But what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about risk? How do you manage it? What are your thoughts about Bitcoin, and also what's going on overseas in other countries? Love to hear more about it, and we can obviously talk more freely on my Patreon about it, which is only $5 a month, $20 if we get the monthly AMA. And I'd love to hear from you. So, lots said today. I'm gonna probably take tomorrow off and rest and recuperate and get ready for another week as we get rolling. And there's lots more to come. Trust me on that. I'll have more videos about that too. But for now, I'm going to close the door on the bureau, say follow leader one more time, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.